Друзі, ми вже зараз розпочинаємо, тому я всіх запрошую, щоб ви всі присіли. Зараз потухне світло, і ми розпочнемо. Я вам, звичайно, хочу подякувати за те, що ви прийшли. Сьогодні багато подій в місті, я подивився зранку. So many different events taking place in Kyiv today. I'm very happy that you found time and came here. We really appreciate it. To this fabulous venue of the Unit City, which is a driving engine of innovation and change in the city. Very happy to see these developments. Good. So we're all set, and I was told that the video is about to start, right?
Experience from the tech ecosystem to create a state-of-the-art European Center of Innovation in Kyiv. Unit City has key pillars: education, business, innovation, life, and mission. Pillar number 1 is Unit Factory Coding School. Its cutting-edge curriculum from French School 42 and free tuition model create a truly exceptional and renewable source of IT professionals. In the next phase of our development, we're opening other educational facilities, including a kindergarten, high school, university, and several research centers. Pillar number 2 is our business corner. Forming the heart of Unit City, the business corner offers tens of thousands of square meters of modern office space and co-working facilities. As a Unit City tenant, you'll enjoy access to all exclusive services designed to help you develop and grow your business. Fundraising, consulting services, legal support, acceleration, and mentorship programs, prototype design labs, and much more. Here, corporations get access to innovative solutions, ideas for business transformation, and a platform to test its products. Unit City streamlines companies with access to talent, corporations, international partners, and investors. Pillar number 3, our innovation quarter, is the brain of Unit City. Here, laboratories and R&D centers test, experiment, design, and create. Unit City is also a magnet for culture and entertainment. Our 4th pillar, leisure, is an indispensable part of the park. Art festivals, live performance, concerts, technology expos, and industry conferences all contribute to the rich tapestry of experiences. A crossroads for collaboration, Unit City brings together individuals from all walks of life. Entrepreneurs, IT professionals, scholars, artists, and students who exchange ideas and sometimes even become partners. Whether you desire recreation or reflection, Unit City can accommodate your needs through a variety of quiet nature zones, health clubs, and fitness centers. Finally, Unit City's 5th pillar, residential services, comes in the form of modern yet cozy apartments offered with an array of world-class amenities. As our resident, you'll live within walking distance of shops, fitness centers, daycare centers, schools, and offices. Living amongst like-minded people in Unit City's residential quarter, you and your neighbors can easily become friends, if not business partners. A city within a city, Unit City has been designed from the ground up to help you build your business and realize your dreams. It's a special place where you can turn an idea into a reality. Come be part of the innovation at Unit City.
Well, excellent video, very impressive. And now, without much further ado, I would like to ask Helen Wolska, the managing partner of the EBS, for the welcome remarks. So, Helen, here you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. EBS is a management consultancy and accounting firm, and we are organizers of this event. So just a few words how this idea came to our mind. We're celebrating 20 years this year, and initially when we started, we thought, we're going to work with business, we're going to help business in Ukraine, whether global or local, be successful, and somehow this will help the country grow. 20 years passed by, and we understand that this is definitely not enough. So this is how we decided to raise the discussion on the future economic vision of Ukraine. Because for the whole history of its independence, Ukraine has been fighting fires and thinking about the fact that people just have to live good. And this is a whole economic idea. As professional consultants, we think it's not enough. So we decided to ask academic society, business society, and civil society their opinion. Somewhere around these societies, we should come to the understanding of what this new economic idea for Ukraine might be. And this is what we're going to speak about today. I am very glad that so many people came, and it just means that it is important for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Indeed, economic idea is very simple. We just want to have good life, good welfare state, and high standards of living. That's for sure. But how can we achieve that? That's all about the discussion. Now I would like to ask Natalia Chervona on behalf of the American Chamber of Commerce to say welcoming remarks. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Dear guests, dear speakers, I'm delighted to see all of you. I believe everyone is after their vacation, after their business trips, and are in good mood, inspired for a new business season. So I'm delighted to be a part of this panel discussion. On behalf of American Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank you all for coming, to thank our distinguished speakers for coming, and also to thank our member company, EBS, for being with the American Chamber of Commerce since 1998. And as a member-driven organization, we are proud to have such members. We are proud to assist them in their business, to have them as friends, as members, and as partners. So I wish everyone to have a great discussion, and thank you for being here with us today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, so good. We got the welcome remarks. So the rules of the game are very simple. I will introduce each speaker one by one, myself, and then I will ask each one of you to speak for about 5 minutes opening remarks. And I'll just stick to my sequence here. And firstly, I would like to introduce Andrew Chahoyan, who is a good friend of mine. He's an American of Ukrainian origin, pretty much matured in the U.S., Kennedy School of Government graduate, worked for the U.S. government. Then he joined a prestigious program with the World Economic Forum, and he was a fellow for 3 years. And he was in charge of managing various programs of the World Economic Forum. Is an advisor on public affairs and strategic communications. Prolific writer. You can actually Google Andrew and find a lot of his articles and blogs published on reputable resources on various challenges facing the world. So Andrew, thanks a lot for your contributions. I'm very happy you could come and join. So the floor is yours.
Well, I get to start. Thank you. Thanks for such kind introduction. Should we just reflect on the very theme of the conference?
Yeah, just on the theme, whatever you want to start with. Okay. We'll have questions later on. I'm going to be more specific. Yeah.
Super. As I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking of where can we draw inspiration? Can we look at other countries? Should we look at Ukraine's history to find that idea? And what I thought would be interesting to share is a recent fact. In the last 25 years, Ukraine's been independent. Its recent independence history is about 25 years. And we also have the Forbes list. And then out of 25 years, Bill Gates was there at the top for 18 years. Who is there now at the top of the list? Jeff Bezos. Yeah. Why are we talking about Jeff Bezos? It's about economic idea for the country. He's invented his entire strategy for the business, for Amazon, to go from this unknown bookseller with very esoteric website to a $1 trillion company as of last week, I think. Just the entire strategy boiled down to 4 pillars, and he called it a flywheel. And I thought it would be useful for us to consider this idea of a flywheel as an engine of Ukrainian economy as well. So brief introduction to mechanics. A flywheel is just a circle, a big metal thing. It's a gear that's really heavy, and then if you can start give it some momentum, right? If you get it going, then it stores energy. It moves on its own. If it's super heavy, and then to push it to get it to start spinning is difficult. But when it is spinning, there's no way of stopping it. So that was Jeff Bezos's logic. He said, look, we're going to build a business, and it's going to be about customer experience. And the customer experience, if it's good, then the customers will come back to our website. We'll have a traffic on our website, and people will come back. And then if we have traffic on our website, then we will have sellers. We will have our vendors. And if we have more vendors, then they'll have more selection. And if we have more selection, then we'll have a great customer experience and more traffic, on and on and on. And the flywheel is spinning. Now you have endless amount of vendors, endless amount of customers, so much traffic, and a $1 trillion business. So if we took this logic and we applied it to an economic model, if Jeff Bezos's business is all about customer experience, that is so, so rewarding that people come back to that site, what should be the economic equivalent of it? I would also use the word customer experience or citizen experience, or we call it business climate, investment climate, anything experience. What does the country do? What's the context in which businesses operate, in which economy exists? And it goes back to taxpayers, it goes back to foreign investors, it goes back to pensioners, anybody. Like, what's the experience? And then how could that be better? Then if you have the experience of some sort, right, and then you have economic activity of some sort, that would be your equivalent to traffic on the website. There's more economic activity if the experience is better, right? If you have more economic activity, then you will have more investment. It's often believed that investment comes first, then you have economic activity. But who will put money into anything until that anything is proven to work or to have a potential to work? So then you get to investment as your third pillar, and everything really maybe where it starts is also the unique context of that specific market. In Ukraine, we use this grain or brains and grains, right? But there has to be more than that. It's not only a couple of words, but what are the endowments in this given context? And in our case, I suppose it's the talent, it's the strategic location, it's access to markets, it's many things. And the common terminology in economics is endowments. What endowments do we have? In a way, that's your selection. So if we have endowments of some sort, we have operating environment, the customer experience that's improving, then you get to economic activity investment, and then you spin this flywheel. It would be an interesting model to consider and to say, can we take lessons from business and bring it into an economic model for the country?
Yeah, very good idea, Andrew. Indeed, if we could run a country like a corporation, so customer experience is very important, right? Investor comes, invests, makes money, everybody's happy, he sends the message, another investor comes. This is a very good idea. We can see what exactly we could, we'll discuss it later, of how and what could be borrowed from the corporate sector and applied in public administration, public policies. And I definitely agree with you. There are certain issues which can be borrowed, certain issues which can't. But we have, we have to be very selective. Now, I'd like to introduce Irina Ozemuk. Irina Ozemuk is also a very good friend of mine. It's just a panel of friends, It's so good. It's so easy to moderate. You don't have to memorize the bios because you know them. So Irina is a graduate of the College of Europe, which is the best European university preparing the people who would pursue careers in the EU institutions. Irina has chosen a different path. She decided to build Europe in Ukraine. And how she decided to do it? She decided to join the Western Enterprise Fund, which is a fund...
now it's American Ukraine then.
Right. Well, you see, that's a good point of discussion, because are we building a European Ukraine or more Americanized Ukraine? You see in different models of development. But definitely, Irina, she is running a local economic development program within the Western Enterprise Fund, and it's now sort of a technical assistance program of the U.S. government. But she is doing plenty of different projects. But one of her projects, she is empowering and inspiring mayors of Ukraine to deliver change, sort of the Tony Robbins of Ukraine, pushing and inspiring them for change. So this is actually very good. I really commend you on that. And she's been the organizer of this International Mayor Summit, which serves as a practical sort of workshop conference where you are sharing the best practices with Ukrainian mayors. Tell us more about it, because all we talk here about something very abstract, but maybe change starts there at the very bottom.
It starts at the College of Europe first. But first of all, thank you for the invitation and for the honor to be here and to probably share some of my thoughts. You know, and when we are talking about the topic that we are searching a new national economic idea, I would like to be, as I am always, it's more provocative and saying the truth. So I have some bullet points that I was thinking about while coming here. First of all, we know already that it's a joke that 27 years ago Ukraine had a great potential, and 27 years after the independence Ukraine still has a good potential. So I think it's a cool thing, but in the same time it's sad that 27 years we still didn't deliver what we could. We can agree that we are a very young democracy, but still I think we could have done better. But after the Financial Times wrote and published an article about Ukraine, and then investments can come here, I think the problem is solved. Let's see. Second thing, as Vasil mentioned, like I was studying the College of Europe, but when I came back to Ukraine, I was working for the projects financed by the European Union. Then I was working for the French government, and now I'm working for a Western NIS Enterprise Fund. And all the time I was saying that I'm earning money from EU or from the US, but I'm working for Ukraine. And my question is, as all of this is technical assistance, why we learned so little from all these best practices? Because it's, again, more than 20 years of experience from abroad. We talk about Poland, we talk about Baltic countries, we talk about Germany and France model in public administration. We talk about countries that are doing great in terms of business development, but we are still lagging behind. Third one is what we are ready to sacrifice. You know, Ukraine and especially Kyiv, and there are probably some more cities where there are a lot of great events like Lviv Jazz Fest. Yes, when during this event there are lots of conferences where Ukrainian opinion leaders, business representatives, politicians are coming. So for me, there is always a question. That's already a great bunch of people, you know, that could do the change in Ukraine, but it's still not happening. Are we ready to sacrifice something? And my recent observation, as I adore driving, you know, but mostly I'm driving in a city. But this last weeks I was driving to Lviv and to Odessa by car. And basically the behavior of people, how they drive, it really reflects how we behave in the society. You know, some even they are not ready to get off the left line, you know, because they cannot go faster, but they will stay still there because it's a shame to drive in the right one if you are not, even if you cannot do it faster, you know. So again, it's all about what we are ready to sacrifice, and sometimes some personal ambitions were for what we call a common good, you know, and good for the society. The next point is something what we have now, it's following the trends or creating the trends. When the book Startup Nation was published, Ukraine said, yeah, we are the second startup nation. We have IT everywhere. Agriculture is one sector, but IT is so important, you know. But then we started working in Western NIS with startups and supporting incubators. And we saw that there is a lot of startups that are just copy-paste, you know. We have good professionals in IT, we can outsource, but are we ready and can we produce something new, you know? And I have great startup that you probably heard about. It's like PetCube, you know? It's very popular in US market. Why? Because according to some statistics in US there are more pets than kids, you know? So that's the market where to sell it, you know? WhatsApp, we all use it. I was even asking Vasil whether there is a food here, so I was writing to him.
through WhatsApp. He said yes, so I was happy. But that's also one of the co-founder is Ukrainian, but there is no made in Ukraine. Israel did a special visa for startups. You know, they can come there and they can work because they want to have more made in Israel. You know, and somehow we don't do this. And probably the last thing, it's also related to cities because we talk about national level and local level, and you know that according to again some futurists, that's the word, in the future there might not be states but cities, you know, and we already see that cities are competing. Amsterdam wants to be the European Silicon Valley, competing with London and Berlin. But what is more interesting, I discovered this summer, I met an advisor to the mayor of New York, and even New York is competing with Silicon Valley, you know, and they said, like, we have everything what they have, but people still consider us a little bit different. So I think we need to attract more attention to cities as drivers of, like, economic drivers, you know, and also influential centers, and we can already see it in Ukraine. And what we saw also in the video, it's wow, yeah. It's like I would like to be Ukraine to be like unit city in lots of aspects. I just came back from Singapore this summer, and I was shocked positively on the change of the country both, yeah. And probably what I saw in the video, it kind of reminds me Singapore. But are we able and ready to do this in small cities, in villages? Are we ready to get leaders who can do this, you know? And,
exactly, yeah.
And again, are we ready to fight corruption? Because when we are talking about investments, you know, we still face the wall of corruption, and investors are not afraid of the war, you know? Like we were talking once with the economic advisors in the embassies. They said that it's more about corruption and justice system and not about the war, you know. So I have more questions than
we can discuss
answers.
it later. Yeah, this
yes,
is
but
very,
that's
very
basically
good
the question that all of us are asking ourselves, being in the business, in politics, or in civil society, trying to respond what is our role and how we can change it.
Very good insight. Thank you, Irina. Indeed, that was the reason why EBS has decided to run 3 different panels discussing, you know, attracting different kind of people to generate various ideas. But I totally agree with you that all those points are valid. We'll discuss them later as we go. You know, speaking of corruption, somebody recently, one British guy, English guy actually told me, oh, at least Ukraine can brag having the most transparent corruption in the world because everybody knows who got for what and how, right? So we can, at least we can claim some transparency there. I'm not sure we can really use it as our achievement, but as cynic as it is, it's always quite clear why it's here and who's getting what for what, right? Nevertheless, we have to curb it and actually get rid of it completely. Otherwise, we cannot succeed. Dmytro actually is sort of the brain because he represents a think tank, and a think tank people think and write, right? So he's been running the think tank for the past 15 years. Primarily, it's a think tank focused on economic and financial research. I understand you've done projects in the former Soviet Union countries, including Azerbaijan and some Central Asian countries, and you've been writing various policy papers and serving as an advisor on various international donor-funded projects. Dmytro, the floor is yours. My question is, I mean, for you as the representative of a think tank, because even internally we had a discussion, can an economic idea be national or not? Because is it appropriate to use the word national? Can we say that certain countries this idea will work and others it won't? Therefore, there has to be some sort of national idea. You know, this is just a provocative question, but feel free to start with your opening remarks. We'll get to the details later.
Okay, actually, when I was thinking about this big economic idea for Ukraine, I was just recalling success stories of other countries, and I think that what they have in common, that they opened opportunities for some prosperity. You said that money and some basic stuff is not like could be used as a big economic idea. But I think that for all of them, if you think, for instance, Singapore, even US, when people have been migrating to a new continent, they have been looking for opportunities. They have been looking for a new life, for better life. And unfortunately, when we think about Ukraine, Ukraine is so-called, it's an economic term, limited access order. So our opportunities are actually limited. If you consider Poland, some other success stories like Slovakia, Baltic states, what have been doing those countries, leaders of those countries, they have been opening opportunities. It was not about some big idea they had behind, for instance, Leszek Balcerowicz. They have been trying just to survive. Just to survive as a nation, people have been starving, and they have been trying to just to make their subsistence level. The same story is about Singapore. For now, it's we have a huge success stories known for the whole world. Lee Kuan Yew, this big book. But as far as I remember, when he was writing about their start, it was a huge threat of external intervention. They have been just striving for survival. And after that, some PR people called it like Asian tiger, etc. stuff. But first, you need to have something to put this brand on. When talking about Ukraine, unfortunately, we are not ready for opening opportunity. It's my impression. It's my impression because it's very. For instance, one political party. I'm not sure if I should mention it. A few years ago, they took this slogan: "Opportunities for everyone." There is a demand for this. People want to have opportunities. People want to have prosperity. They want to earn, not only to be given some 1,000 hryvnia, etc. They want to earn. They want to to express themselves, to create something new. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, it's very complicated. Previous speaker mentioned IT sector. IT exists in a bit different dimension than the whole Ukraine. They exist in, electronic dimension. Law enforcement bodies can hardly catch you there. You can, so physically you can stay in Ukraine, but in essence you are part of a global market. That's the story. So people which make business in IT, they actually make business not in Ukraine. The truth. They make business in global market, and they use opportunities of global market. Again, if you are talking about the biggest companies are many years ago someone took risk. And from thousands of people who took risks, this one person, they actually have been remunerated for catching the point. If you want to create opportunities for people in Ukraine, risks should be remunerated. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, risk is punished. Because at the end of the day, after all risks, attempts, when you are remunerated for your investments and for your attempts, probably you will face someone from SBU or other law enforcement bodies who will be taking fruits of your efforts. That's very unfortunate. So my key point that we can name it whatever, Ukrainian dream, American dream. The brand could be Black Sea Tiger, whatever. But the key point is that this idea should include open opportunities for everyone, equal opportunities for everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. My personal memories, right after the Orange Revolution in 2004, my company organized a big conference in Frankfurt, and we called it Business Opportunities of Ukraine, Ukraine's European Emerging Tiger. It was 2005 in Frankfurt, so we thought, oh, we're going to get all these people here. Change is coming, new government in place, and everything. We were very excited. It didn't work out, right? So now, 13 years later, we've already experienced another euphoria 4 years ago. Now lots of disillusionment, lots of disappointment. And of course, the issues you're talking about, the reward, right? Every risk taker should have an award, remunerated and have an award. And that reward can be taken away by somebody who feels like he has a right to do so. And it's, of course, very unfortunate. But there is another point of that. The thing is that Ukrainians are not really risk takers. We don't have the culture of risk taking. We don't have this entrepreneurial culture. Because it's, in a way, you see, it's ingrained in the DNA of American people to take risks, because it's a nation of entrepreneurs, of businesses. If you fail, it's fine. You throw a big party, you start another business. In Ukraine, we're still very risk-averse. What will people think? What my neighbor is going to think if I fail? So in a way, we have to cultivate that culture of risk-taking, right? We can now, speaking of entrepreneurship, I'm very happy to introduce Svetlana Kolomyets. She's a social entrepreneur, which I think is extremely important these days. And before that, she was in the government. She was the Deputy Minister of Natural Resources and Environment. So we'd be happy to also hear your views and insights on sustainable development. Now we are chasing the economic growth, but we should still be cognizant that this growth should be sustainable, right? And also, with your now experience that since you left the government and you started this Перемога space, which is an open working space, which is hosting many interesting events and companies and businesses, it would be interesting to hear your views on the topic of discussion.
Thank you very much, Vasil. Good afternoon for everybody, and I would like to thank for this invitation. For me, it was a bit unexpected to talk about a new economic model, as I'm a lawyer by training and had quite a long and intense legal practice. Then headed in the government, and now I'm in a social entrepreneurship. This is true. I would also like to thank the EBS company for making this event, because it's a bit unexpected, but it's a really huge responsibility that you take it and you raising issues like that. And thank you for opportunity to discuss it and to share our ideas. Regarding what you mentioned, Vasily, when I got invitation to get invited to this event, I first start thinking about other countries and examples that could inspire us. And I've got one souvenir from the time when I was at the ministry. We had dinner with the ambassador of South Korea. And during the talk, we've been discussing the path of reform, the path of victory of South Korea and Ukraine. And I said, Ambassador, you see, we are very different countries and we are in very different circumstances. And he said, no, Svetlana, you are mistaken. We are not that different. And the truth is that when we started our path to victory, we were in much worse condition than you are now. What he meant is obvious. They were in the state of war just like we are. And to some extent, they are still there. And South Korea is not the only country which is in the circumstances like this. I mean, we have a great example of Israel. We had example of Singapore. Once again, the colleagues already mentioned this. And if we're talking about Singapore, at the very beginning of their independent way, they even did not have drinking water. We in our country are experiencing a luxury of having natural resources. We are experiencing luxury of having agriculture, a wonderful soil. And from the one hand, this is a great advantage for us. But from the other hand, this is probably a minus also. I mean, we're still in a comfortable position. It's not that painful for us now. Yeah? If we compare to, once again, Israel or South Korea, they didn't have soil. They didn't have any natural resources. They had quite a poor education, with a quite a population with a poor education. So a whole bunch of problems we do not have right now. And whether this is a plus or minuses for us, I don't know. But we have to realize that in our common situation, we are a virus. We are a virus of freedom for the neighboring country. And you know what usually people do to viruses? People kill viruses. If we don't want to be killed as a country, we have to change. We have to succeed or die. And in these terms, I've been thinking about other story. Except of being involved in environmental activities and social entrepreneurship, I have another passion. This passion is science. My very first social activities was launching a scientific cafe in Kyiv. This is a very widespread, popular format of talking in informal way with the scientists explaining very simple, in simple way, quite a difficult, sophisticated things. People just talk to scientists over the cup of coffee, and in general, it builds bridges between society and science. So that was my very first activity, and after the revolution, after working in the government, unfortunately I couldn't have an opportunity to proceed doing that. But a few months ago, a group of young ladies and gentlemen approached me and said, "Hey, we are doing the In Science conference, and tomorrow, just in this premise, this In Science conference has to take place, has to start." And I see nodding some of you, so I know that you people know about this great event. So a group of young people spent a year of their life preparing this conference, convincing the top universities, top organizations from abroad, scientists, to come here to Ukraine, to talk about technologies, to talk about innovations, to inspire people. And they brought speakers from Mars Society, from NASA, Virgin Hyperloop, and so on and so forth. At the very end, like 2 weeks ago, before the event, the biggest sponsor, I don't want to name the company, withdrew. So the guys just do not have enough money to cover expenses. And this, in my point of view, this is a great failure of the country. This is a great failure of all of us, that neither government nor business supports enough things like that. And if we go back to the example of South Korea or Israel, today I start searching the data on how many do countries spend on science development. So the Israel and South Korea are the countries that spend the most. They spend more than 4% of GDP. And this is not coincidence. This is something we have to take care about. This is something we have to think about. How we do treat science, how we do treat technologies, innovation. That's what Irina said, that yes, we are trying to create favorable conditions for a startup community to develop, but we do not have enough educated people, and we do not have enough potential at the moment still. I think we still have to invest more in education, in science development, and things like that. This is the only thing that could boost our economic development in the long term.
Exactly. And hey, thanks a lot for mentioning this conference. Those young people approached me as well. So we have a call for action. We can start that crowdfunding campaign to support the conference starting here tomorrow. So we can collect some money.
So did we.
Please donate, support the scientists. And actually, but I was impressed actually, some interesting people coming over to Kyiv to speak here tomorrow, that's for sure. Now, we start the discussions. So I will basically, I've got some of my own questions, but we also will be opening the floor up for your questions. So, keep them in mind, and I will let you know when we will be ready to collect questions from the audience. But you, pretty much, you've been mentioning different countries, and of course, Asian countries have popped up several times. South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong maybe, but I remember when I was a student back a long time ago, 13 years ago in London, I was presenting in a course in international political economy course on the Asian tigers, sort of, so the Asian miracles. And some interesting findings came to light, actually, and we had this discussion, so we can have a discussion now. But the question was the following. In 1993, World Bank published a report analyzing the success of these Asian countries, South Korea included, right? And they have found that it was export-led growth thanks to the export. A drastic development of industry, new markets, big brands such as Samsung, LG. The same applies to Japanese companies, etc., all international markets. And then there were many of other issues. And so they came up with big reports what those governments did, what were the sort of prescriptions. And then World Bank took that report and thought, okay, there are so many countries in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Union and the Balkan states. There are, these poor countries in South America. Let's use this as a guideline. Let's apply this from Asia in those countries. And you know what? They all failed. It didn't work out. So they went back and they said, so what happened? Why it worked in Asia, it didn't work in Latin America, it didn't work in Eastern Europe? So there was something else. And of course, one of the actual conclusions was that there was the role of ideas, a different society. The society could really get mobilized. The society could sacrifice something which other societies cannot. Everybody's citing Singapore, but I think Singapore is totally relevant to Ukraine because, look, Singapore is an authoritarian state, and they were able to succeed because they were authoritarian. For Singaporean people, the issue of human rights, or freedom of press and others, is not as important as it is for the European nations. So maybe this model is not the best one, and there is a famous fascination with the idea of Singapore. Of course, we can borrow some prescriptions, but I don't think it's relevant. So my question to you is, let's talk about other countries. Somebody mentioned Poland, right? Slovakia, something which would be perhaps more applicable in the case of Ukraine. Or maybe we should come up with some sort of mixture, what that mixture can be. And also, maybe you could answer the question, what was the key driver of that? Was it politics? Or it was actually economics behind change, right? Of course, and let's think about history. Let's draw some sort of examples from history, because we understand that, let's say, that after the Second World War and the reconstruction of Europe, it actually created a certain model, right? And that model was applied, and the way, there was, it was just that kind of world that we lived in. Today we live in a different world, different circumstances. But I think some things just work all the time, others don't. But what could be that unique magic pill, right, that which could come up to an economic idea, could boil down to that idea. I'm just, giving you some of the, whoever wants to start, but of course I'm always happy to start with Andrew because he's got so many different ideas in mind. But Andrew, so what can we borrow from Asia? What should we borrow from Europe? And maybe you are an American citizen. Can American system be applied here? Because frankly speaking, it's a totally different society from the European society. And frankly, for me, welfare state of Europe is much more appealing than the sort of, totally capitalistic system of America.
That's a great question, and there is probably not a simple or a single answer. When I was thinking of what are the good cases to compare it to, let's take China. I think it's the Chinese economic miracle is probably something every country should try to learn from, lifting 100 million people out of poverty. I remember traveling to Shanghai and looking at the Shanghai Museum, showing basically fields, half a story huts, and then you look out the window and you see a city that's no different from Tokyo, and between this this kind of barren land and this metropolis, it's only 20 years. So things are doable, they are achievable. But as Vasil said, you cannot draw a direct comparison. Same with the U.S. It's a very complex economy. We cannot say that Ukraine could move from that state to this other state and then start, replicating the whole thing. It's the timing, I guess, matters. Like, what should we set as our immediate goal? Where do we focus? One thing that we should definitely not do is choose winners and losers in terms of economic sectors. That's usually the worst policy. If you say, oh, we need to concentrate specifically on agriculture, we need to concentrate on IT. Like, no, we need to make sure the business environment is such that everybody can succeed. Like, one example I wanted to use, that I live in the Netherlands now. I'm based in Amsterdam. The agricultural exports of this most densely populated European country is about $100 billion. It's the second biggest exporter of food, of ag-related products, right? It's crazy to imagine. It's a country, like I say, it's half of it is below sea level. That it's year-round rain, there's gray skies, and yet it's producing so much exports. It's comparable to Ukraine's entire GDP. In Ukraine, the food exports are $20 billion, and we have I think the territory I think it's 20 times as big as the Netherlands. I remember looking at the factor of difference. If Ukraine were to get as much value out of 1 hectare of land that Netherlands is getting, it's the factor of 100. Okay. So in reality, if we were to adopt technology, if we were to open up space for innovation without specifically choosing agriculture, IT, or any specific sector, if innovation is allowed to proceed, then we could become a superpower in that particular sector, right? Maybe one quick comment. I don't know if I can answer your question directly, but we talked about science and we looked at some country examples. I think it's also important to look at kind of progress in terms of global competition. If we go back to, I don't know, 10th century or first century, what did countries compete for? The land matter, right? Because land was the economy. You know, the more territory you have, the more economy you had, and wars were fought over land. Then the next competition was over resources. You know, the energy resources mattered a lot, and you'd have competition for access to resources. The most reasonable competition today is for talent. Talent is the biggest resource, because from talent comes innovation, comes the economic value is now not created in your land mass or in your even in your natural resources. It's the talent. So if we recognize that as a key factor on which to base the economic model or economic thinking for the future, the talent competition is the most important one. So education, the science, and those things are the pillars on which the new model should be built.
Competition for talent, and how do we compete for talent? You see, I often write and talk on nation branding, and one of the components of nation branding is actually how many people want to move to your country, right? It's attractiveness to live, right? And it's very important because this is how you compete for talent. If everybody wants to move to the US, apparently it's been this talent which came over to the US, which was a source of this innovation and new ideas, right? As well as diversity, which is created as a result of it. Speaking of the Netherlands is one of my favorite European nations. I spent there some time a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed with one story. I have a friend who is running a foreign policy think tank, which was commissioned by the Association of Potato Growers of the Netherlands to do a report on the scenarios in the Middle East, basically political scenarios and war scenarios in the Middle East, right? So they paid big sum of money for that report, which was then presented. And when he asked the question, why are you so interested in political sort of outcome of the war in Syria and all the rest, right? And they said, look, we sell potato plants to that region in the amount of $3 billion. Potato plants. They don't sell potatoes, but it's potato plants because it's sandy ground, sandy soil, right? And when I realized that $3 billion of potato plants to the Middle East only, right? And this is phenomenal, right? This is what is, you know, this innovative agriculture of the Netherlands. Now, coming to Irena. Irena, I'll make your life easier because you've been analyzing different cities, right? Different mayors and in different countries. But what, in these 3 years of your work on this, what was like the most striking example? And probably the one that would be most relevant to Ukraine, you said, oh, the mayor of such and such city, he did this, and this is exactly what we need, and this is exactly what we can achieve in the Ukrainian cities. Is there any sort of like examples, or maybe there are several examples, right, which you can talk, elaborate about and talk about them?
Yes, but I first want to respond
please
to
Please do, yeah.
No, I'll try to be concise. First of all, I think that there is no copy-paste solution, and I was traveling quite a lot this year, and one of the destinations was Cuba. It was my dream for a long time. So I bought for my boyfriend a T-shirt with Che Guevara, whatever. We entered the last hotel in Miami, and the guy on the reception looks at it and, Che, are you kidding me? And then we started, but why? Like, because honestly, I didn't know much about Che Guevara, yeah, but I knew that it's a hero. So the guy started telling us that basically that Che Guevara was samozvanets, kind of. He came from Argentina. He started to teach them how to build their life, and then he was also like this man in his 40s who always needed the action, and one of the advantage was that he was handsome. You know what? I was thinking about Ukraine, and Ukraine has basically the same example. I will not mention it, but we are kind of fans of foreigners to tell us what to do and how to do it. Georgian model didn't work, but we were so much fan of it. Even Baltic countries, it's not still working if we are seeing this working there. But I would say that we know already all the solutions from all the countries. There are reports, and there are even reports translated, what is important for Ukraine, yes? But I think that there is no a copy-paste solution. We can take something from them, from there, and something from there. And Singapore, I still don't agree. I still think democracy is important, but they were facing a big political threat, and they are built on water. They increased their territory by 22%, building the land, So that's a great thing, So they economically, they were also growing, just facing the political threat, even if it's not a great example of democracy. Second, what I think it's, once I wrote an article which is called "Culture Can Be Built Only with High Fines." And I still believe in this because we are not in this state when we are so conscious and we think about common good. And I know that if I don't put the waste here, it's also good for you. I'm like here we still think about individual thing, and our home starts when the apartment, our doors are closing, not the building, not the street. So I think this we need to change a lot. And here political leadership is also important. I do agree that we compete for talents, but look, we at Western NIS created a program which is called Seed Grant. Lots of Ukrainians went to study in the US, they come back, and what do? We meet with state-owned enterprise and business asking, can you help them can you find the job for them? Because what? They are not needed. They are not demanded in Ukraine, maybe in the business, yes, but not in the state. No one wants an MBA, cool MBA student who knows how it works, probably legally and without corruption, in the system, because they are not needed, and you know why. And the one of important thing is also for national idea, we don't do any SWOT analysis for the country. We do them for projects, we do them for, probably cities, but we have scientists and young scientists, and that's a big compliment to Ukraine. We have natural resources, but we know what our weaknesses is, but we are not turning them into the opportunities, and that's a big sad part of how we are developing. Talking about cities, it's a bit the reflection of the country, and also lots of things are based on personalities, unfortunately, and there is a lot of politics in this. I would say there are in Ukraine even quite great and visionary mayors, who do change, who kind of contribute to changes despite everything, even having smaller budgets, and they do a lot. And for instance,
who do you mention? Just can you be more specific? Maybe some smaller towns we're not aware of.
I will mention, I am fan of some cities, and probably I'm not allowed to say this, but I do admire Voznesensk and Dolina for their energy efficiency. Those are cities of 20 and 35,000 people, but they're quite good. Yesterday, I met a friend of mine who just came back from Slavutic. Slavutic, it's probably the city where people don't want to live. Yes, it's so close to Chernobyl. And it's the youngest cities. There are no streets. There's only kvartалы, areas, like Litovsky or, Minsky, when the post-Soviet republics came to help after the accident there. What do? They do a great project when the roofs of the buildings will be borrowed by a business company, and then they will generate alternative energy, and then it will be with no gas, and they will try to make the city as energy efficient as possible, and that's a great example. In Slavutic, you hear what I'm talking about. I like Zhytomyr, and lot of us talk about this. They don't do only changes in transport. You know, that with the help of Visa, they did this payment in trolley buses, and sometimes trolley buses are quite old, and I have impression that they will break apart, but still it's innovation. But what I admire in Zhytomyr, that they declare that soon, but I'm afraid to make a mistake, either 2022 or 24, they will have a drinkable water from at home, you know. So that's also the visionary thing, and they know that that's a long-term investment. And even if the mayor will not be re-elected, you know, they already build the ground for next leadership, potential next leadership, whatever. Of course, you will say that it's obviously it's like this, but Vinnytsia is doing a great job, yes. And we can talk about past leadership as well, but I know...
Is there any other reason why you think Vinnytsia is doing so well?
I kind of think I know. But they have great ambitions. And even if it's the motivation, why not? I know quite well the mayor, and you know that we organized the rating of mayors last year, and he was this innovative mayor. But also I know his team, and the deputy mayor is going everywhere and trying to sell the airport, to sell in terms of to bring investments. And they already built they have already one flight to Kyiv, which is the shortest in Ukraine, 35 minutes if I'm not mistaken. Right. Yeah, but that's thinking strategically, and then that's also pushing to bring investments. I think it's already public information, but you know that Vinnytsia, together with 4 other cities, were competing for a great investment, which is the company called HEAD. And those who are skiing, they know, because it's ski equipment. And
but it's also tennis equipment as well, right? HEAD? With tennis and skiing.
Yeah, I don't play tennis, but I am skier, you know. So they, yes, and they won this competition. And Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, Zhytomyr were competing, but what they did, they created industrial park. But what is also the problem of Ukrainian cities, that when there is, and of the country as well, yeah, when there is a trend, let's build IT parks and innovation parks, everyone put this in the strategy. Even small cities where it's not needed, and it will not give any economic benefits for this, you know. So what is the weakness? It's we are not. Oh, I'm always saying this. We are not calculating economic added value of the city and profile. That's very important
not
for cities.
Economic added value. Now we're going to ask Dmitro what that means, which I think is a very good what it entails, how we interpret that. But Dmitro, I had an initial question. You're welcome to answer it, but I have an additional question for you as well. You represent a think tank, right? I often now, when I go anywhere abroad and I speak to different audiences, I always say, look, we're also disappointed that not much has been achieved during the past 4 years. However, we have a very vibrant civil society, and you, as a representative of that, think tank society, we've seen actually so many other NGOs and think tanks which have popped up after the Revolution of Dignity, and I think this is our strengths. How, in your opinion, think tanks generally, or your particular think tank, could contribute to economic change, economic transformation in our country? Just to get your ideas on that.
Okay, so probably I should start that economy is social. It's not like natural stuff like gravitation or something which you probably could not dispute. It's social. It's relation between people, how they used to operate, how they used to make transactions, how they used to make deals, earn money, etc. You know, and when coming back to this point about prescriptions or recommendations, a few weeks ago I had a talk with a medical doctor, and we discussed that 5 or 10 years ago some medicines were effective for some diseases, and after that diseases became resistant to them, and some other not previously effective medicines, they became effective. So it changes. So if diseases and bacteria are changing their pattern of behavior, when we are talking about people, so the situation is much more complicated. For instance, if people in Georgia or in Singapore used to make some operation in some specific way, for instance, assuming they didn't used to like apply their relations, etc., for squeezing out some funds. I'm just talking theoretically. In Ukraine, it's a bit different situation. And when you are making simply borrowing some experience and bringing it to Ukraine, usually you need to understand that, for instance, in Japan you have Japanese, and in Ukraine you have Ukrainians who are operating in a bit different manner. We are very similar in many stuff, but traditions, some ways of arranging contracts, arranging those transactions, they are probably will differ. And that's the story. And when talking about civil society, if you want to change something, first of all, we need to change perception, and this change of perception is in our brains. Civil society, in my opinion, so again, we are talking about science, we are talking about some models, theoretical models, demand, supply, etc., models which effectively have been developed in the West, in US, for their specific, not specific, but let's say major behavior pattern. You know, when we are talking about this kind of stuff, we need to understand that we can reach changes, we can achieve changes, create changes only if those changes will come in our heads. That's basic.
Exactly.
And civil society, for instance, our think tank, we have one of such initiative called Price of the State. And the key target is to persuade people that they are paying taxes. Many people simply do not understand that, for instance, services from the state, they have already paid for that. They believe that there is a benevolent planner, state, some civil servant who takes money from rich people and gives to poor and creates education, pay for school. Probably you remember that when we were in Soviet Union, we were told that the government pays for us, for our education, for our healthcare service. It's not true. People are paying for that. But they are making small donations, and taxes are collected in a very, how to say, non-payful manner, and people simply do not understand that everything is paid from their pockets. It's only one part of the story. So that's my answer, how civil society and think tanks, and not only think tanks, other NGOs can contribute to change of our way of living and to improve open our opportunities.
Yeah, and definitely we should also talk about the pharmaceutical industry, because we're talking about neuroscience and all those drugs. We can change our perception and brain performance, right? Anyways, but this is a very interesting points that you have mentioned, and definitely they are all valid. There was some sort of comment I wanted to say, but anyways, I will come back to that later on. Svetlana, you've heard already the previous speakers. We don't really have some sort of like. I think this is a beauty of such panels, because we can really, and the topic is so broad, there are so many issues we can discuss, right? But I've talked about different models, right? You know, European, Asian models, you can talk about that. But also, I'm still, you know, we're talking here about civil society and about, you know, new economic idea. But you sacrificed 2 years, 3 years of your time when you were in the ministry, right?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, but it was like 3 years, right? So because it was. But tell me, what were the biggest frustrations you had? What? I mean, and now in the retrospect, I understand when you were on the job, and of course, coming back to our topic of our discussion, right? Because I think it's all linked, right? So we've had a technocratic government in 2014, and some had good people in place. They've achieved something, and then it didn't work out, right? And they gave up. They were not ready for the politics which was there. Now we have a new team of people, but it all comes down to one, you know, simple question: how can we make our life better here, right? Just share your insights, share your experiences.
Yes, Vasily. I will reflect on a number of things, what colleagues said and what you already asked. And firstly, about the issue of pill. There is no pill for the economy of Ukraine, colleagues, and let's not look for that anymore. We will not find the quick solution for our problems. We have to start thinking about long-term things and long-term projects. Someone may say that it's too late to do that, we do not have enough time, we're going to fail as a state or something like that. But other people at the same time are starting things like, for example, Ukrainian Academy of Leadership, Vasily, which I know you are directly involved, right? Ukrainian Academy of Leadership.
Not really. I was a little bit involved, but it's more Western Ass Enterprise Fund.
Okay,
Here's the fund which funded that. If it was not for them, it never would exist. But
so credit goes to Irina.
Assisted a little bit at the beginning, yeah.
And the fund. So this is important because people just start things which are long-term. We cannot calculate the effect right now, and we cannot evaluate it right now. Though already 4 years, correct me if I'm mistaken, 4 years of a project. You celebrate 3 years. It's fourth year now, started fourth year. So people are already doing long-term change, long-term things. We will probably feel the outcomes, the results of this project in 10 or 15 years. But it's important that someone just raise the hand and start doing things like that, which will have an effect in a long-term perspective. Also, a few days ago, I just talked to Yuri Filuk, who is the creator of Prompt Renovation Project, which is a clear social impact investment project. And you know, the project, the problem they face now is that they are trying to build it like a business project, but they cannot really calculate an economical effect of this project because you don't know how does it cost, how much does it cost, and how much does it bring to the economy of the city when the grass is green and when the road is clean. You will never calculate this. So it's important for us to step back from short-term solutions and start thinking about long-term things. This is the one thing. The other one, I would reflect on what colleagues were talking about talents, and Vasil, what you asked about the civil service in the country. You know, there was a joke right after the revolution that social lifts after revolution start working so fast that some people even missed their floor. So I'm not sure it applies to everyone who was in government, but still for some people it's fair, and for some reason I think it's even fair for me because we did not expect, we did not know what we will face when we came to government. It was a great challenge. Did we make mistakes? Yes, definitely. Did we do things wrong? Yes, definitely. Some people fail, some people do a great job and still are in place in government. But what we basically had to do at that time, we had to climb on the top of the hill, jump, and start learning how to fly in the process. That was painful, but that was actually a very good personal experience also. And if we are talking about talents, there is a real lack of talents in the civil service. Well, people from NGOs doesn't really eager to change the position in NGO or think tank to the position in the government. A few months ago, I had to talk with lady who is launching the governmental fund to support startups. And for half a year, she tries to find the person who will lead the fund and tries to gather the team together. So from the one hand, yes, there is a huge amount of well-educated, talented people, but from the other hand, for some reason, I don't know, these people cannot find their right path to the government and this right position for themselves to realize their potential for the government. And from the position of an entrepreneur now, as I am a social entrepreneur at the moment, I would reflect on what you said about entrepreneurship. Because this is really a painful thing for me. I think individualism, what Irina was talking about, from the one hand is bad, really. We often consider that our home is our apartment and what's after, it's not our problem. But at the same time, as every medal, this medal has two sides. And we can change this attitude, we can use our individualism as our great potential and great advantage, because individualism, that's what drives entrepreneurship. And if we are talking about national idea, for example, South Korea is building ships. They now control, if I'm not mistaken, like 40% of the
in the world,
overall world market of shipbuilding. I don't know whether Ukraine can find something like that. Southern Korea is building ships. Israel is IT country. Poland is what? I don't know. I cannot define it clearly. And that's normal. That's okay. Ukraine is not obliged to find the ships. We can do a lot of different things and support a lot of different industries. But at the end, what we have to support is entrepreneurial spirit. If we look back in the history, over centuries, Ukrainians were very entrepreneurial, in fact. We were caring about families, we were trying to be a good gospodar, how to say it in English. So yeah, we tried to do our best as a businessman at that time. And then after the Soviet time came, and for 70 years, even more, Soviet authorities tried to do everything to get rid of this individualism and get rid of this entrepreneurial spirit. This is what we now see as the result of this is what we now see as paternalism, because a lot of older people are still expecting something from the government. They're still looking at collective mechanisms and relying on that. But at the same time, a huge amount of young Ukrainians are striving and they want to be entrepreneurs. They want to realize this potential. So we have to somehow find a way to help them. No one in this country, almost no one, is educating how to be an entrepreneur. Just a number of business schools. And what is also important is to celebrate mistakes. Because in our culture, once again, after Soviet times, we all are trying to be the best. We all are trying to get 5 mark. But it's not always possible. You have to admit that everything you do, whether it's good or bad, whether it's mistake or a good thing, it's your experience and you have to celebrate it. This is it.
This is actually a very interesting insight. Let's promote entrepreneurship education. Let's get that positive virus of entrepreneurship all over, somehow into the blood of the Ukrainians, and 20 years from now we're going to see a different country. This is one of my favorite topics of discussion, and can actually triggering entrepreneurship be that national economic idea? What's the role of government? You mentioned a state-owned fund which wants to allocate money to the startups. Frankly, it doesn't really work, and that's some people say it doesn't, because a lot of European nations have tried to propel the startup innovation by giving away subsidies, but the studies found that the minute they ran out of money, they were dead, because those ideas were not good. They couldn't really be they couldn't really face the market. So therefore, the model of the US is much better, because the weak companies which just have no prospect, they just die because they cannot attract financing, and they cannot last as long as European companies can, having those government subsidies, right? So it's a very good point of discussion. We can talk about the role of government in actually driving motivation. There was one of the questions we had prepared, like, do you agree with the statement that if a Ministry of IT development is created in Ukraine, the industry will die? Basically, there will not be a place to fix a calculator. In other words, the minute we try to regulate it, we're going to kill it, right? So therefore, we have to probably apply a healthy dose of that. Now, I would like to open the floor to the audience. Please raise your hand. Introduce yourself, ask a question to the panel, to people individually. Yes, Alex, please. And somebody is having the microphones here. Who's got the microphones?
It's okay.
Okay, good.
Sure. Okay, my name is Alex Lubetsky. I'm a director of the development business of Israeli and technological company, Oxbridge. So most of you, yes.
Mention Israel. Everybody mentioned.
Yes, Israel.
They all come from there.
Yeah, it's good PR. Yeah. It's good PR, public relations. So, okay, first of all, thank you for everybody for their speeches, for your excellent moderation. That is an example for me. And I have just a few notes, and then the question to Irina. So, first of all, I agree with the left line and about the cars that you told. But as in Italy, people told that the mother of idiots is always pregnant. And I wouldn't surprise you that in Italy or Israel there are these kind of people. This year I was the first time in Bulgaria. So in my opinion, that Bulgaria, Slovakia, they're not so happy. Big spirit of innovations. So in this country, I feel myself as a European and as the leader of a nation that's ahead. And about entrepreneurship spirit, well, in my native city, Chernivtsi, people would not agree with you. They always try to deal with stuff. So the question to Irina, that first of all, thank for you about your international mayor summit. It's a really great job, and we are actually work in the field also, travel a lot, especially in Western Ukraine, and know the result of his work. And my question is, you told about added value. Everybody of us has our favorite city, and we are also. And as for you, what is a city in Ukraine that it gives more added value in the terms of economics, not only PR or something like this is interesting, but about money? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. And I think it's not that my opinion matters, but figures matter, and we would need to check them. And sometimes it might be cities that have like big factories, and not lots of IT companies. So I would need to check this. But you can know already that there are a few centers. Let's say Kyiv, like the capital, is always a driving center. Yes, because everyone wants to come here, and create here. And there is lots of international companies, donors, etc. Lviv has found its niche. It's more IT plus culture, and tourism is, and there are lots more tourists in Lviv than coming to Lviv than to Kyiv. Let's see what will happen with Vinnytsia, Dnipro, and Odessa. With the port, might become sometimes also the driving force. But then that's what is important for me. It's to see the sectors where they can be effective. And also we would need to look at because one thing is the business and economic added value, but also the management of the city is important, whether the city is creating these conditions, and here deregulation matters as well, yes, and conditions and investments, because we cannot sell in a very positive sense of this word, to donors and to investors, say no, everything will be great here, and then they come and they see it's not the case. They are not protected. Justice system is not fixed. And one example of Khmelnytsky, I really love the city, and we met the mayor, and it was quite fun, let's say, because we were doing the TV show there. But he told us that they brought a German investor who was ready to build a factory there, and they didn't find people who wanted to work. Why? Because they are choosing subsidies, because again, it's instability, because they think, okay, if the factory will now we will earn for a year or 2 or 3, then the factory will close. What do I do? Will I reapply for subsidies? So that's, again, when even talking about cities and the economic drivers, we are talking about more global things. I don't know whether I answered your question, but we can check together who is bringing more to the economy of Ukraine. Thank you.
Good. Do we have other questions? There was.
Thanks a lot for so multi-stakeholder and informative discussion. I would like to continue the previous question and answer of Irina about local businesses, because my name is Olga. I'm representing middle-sized agri-food company located in Western Ukraine. And you mentioned about leaders in cities and small towns and villages. Previously, I have worked in international technical aid project with Voznesensk city mayor Vitaly Lukov and Dolina city mayor. They are awesome, and I know what a great job is around their leadership. I would like to ask about the role of local businesses, because managing local business. In my case, it's managing agri-food company in 4 villages of Western Ukraine. It's not only about leadership, but about people. People who are thinking about do they want to stay in Ukraine and work in our company or move to Poland, Portugal, Spain, or so on. So I would like to ask what mechanisms may be efficient and successful for local businesses to motivate local population. Is there more like material, financial instrument, or there are any immaterial issues? Maybe Andriy may continue because he mentioned.
By the way, this is a very good question which could be applied to everybody, because the question of migration, and apparently all people, when choosing their identity, it's a very interesting discussion about identity. How do you choose your identity, who we are? We choose it with a calculator, right? We open the calculator and figure out, okay, life is going to be better in America, so I'm going to move to America and become American, right? And it's always been like that, because basically economy, or actually your personal income, is the main driver, right? If people can find a better job in Poland, they will go to Poland. So those agri companies that come from a small town in Western Ukraine and have friends in agriculture that say we don't have people to work for. I mean, they don't. I mean, they all left to Poland. So the only way. And so, what's the solution? How do we actually can prevent that massive migration from coming? On the other hand, all those people who work abroad, they send remittances. And what was the recent number on the Ukrainian remittances? $9 billion, if I'm not mistaken. 11? It's huge. I mean, it's huge influx of money which comes here, it's being spent here, people start businesses, buy property, etc., etc. So there is a positive effect from that as well. But how do we mitigate the negative implications of migrations that we've been seeing in the last couple of years?
I actually I went to a different event this morning, and Natalie Yareska was speaking and describing her experience in Puerto Rico, former Minister of Finance who's now helping fix the Puerto Rican economy. And then she described a situation that is the opposite of what I pitched in the opening remarks. She described this vicious circle, not the virtuous circle. And let me sum it up, and I'll explain how it relates to where we are in Ukraine. She said that the economic conditions in Puerto Rico are pretty awful, and 25% of the population just left the island in the recent few years. And since that happened, the market became less attractive. Investment is not coming because there is nobody to work, and there's nobody to sell services to. And then since investment is not coming, then there are no more jobs, and then there's no economic activity, more people leave. And you kick off this vicious circle, and it just, like, think of the effect of it, right? And it's, the brain drain is one word we used, and it's like where we are in this cycle, right? And it's a big challenge of leadership. What are the authorities offering to the people? Is there a vision that is appealing, that is inspiring? And so that one example that we'll look at, and then I think in Ukraine, there's this underlying assumption that when people leave, it's mostly negative. Then I wanted to look at a very different example, India and China. China is now transitioned from this low labor cost kind of economy that picked up, right, became a manufacturing facility for the world. Then they competed on the scale of their market. Now they're really keen on competing within innovation, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of U.S. educated PhDs of Chinese descent that are coming back. And the innovation in China is contingent on that. It's the people that left maybe for multiple generations haven't lived in China, but they're now becoming the engine that will propel that country forward. Indian outsourcing industry came from diaspora, Indian diaspora, again, living abroad for generations, and then connecting the Western demand to Indian supply. So having Ukrainians abroad, remittances is only part of the equation that is immediate, but it also offers that base, that connectivity. As long as people don't forget the country they left, and then if the sentiment is such that they think that it's their mission to give back, to be connected to the home country, if that is there, if there is an aspirational vision for the country, then even if you're Ukrainian working in Poland or Italy or US, you're an asset to this country. But if you left disgruntled and I'm never coming back, I want nothing to do with it, then that's not a good scenario. So it's we should not look at people moving away as an end game. It's just, what does Ukraine stand for? What's its national idea? Where is it going? And is that vision well communicated, and is it attractive to folks that left?
Mm-hmm. Good points.
I have a few thoughts about this issue. First of all, I don't know what the solution is. I will be honest with you. Yeah. Second, I think I am a fan of migration, but temporary. When people go, when they learn, when they become different, and they come back here different. One example. Once I was flying to Italy, I was organizing a trip to my parents to Rome, and we were flying with Wizz Air from Lviv. The majority of clients of Wizz Air were Ukrainian women working in Italy. And, of course, the flight was delayed. Then there was another technical problem. And these women, they behaved differently. They started, requiring, but what? Give us water, give us food, give us compensation, And they were very, let's say, humble, but they knew what their rights are in front of the company. And, they were saying, you're the European company, so let's stick to European standards. So for me, there is a change that happens with people, despite the fact that they do not probably the most intellectual job. That's the first thing. Second, there is a lot of Ukrainians migrating not for opportunities that are lacking here, not to work in world-known companies, but to stay in the US speaking Russian with Russian people around, But they just want to feel, safe, in a good climate, in a good environment, And when no one is requiring anything from them, so that's another category. And the third is have you, because I haven't, and it's probably my ignorance on lack of knowledge, have you heard about state program how to facilitate the Ukrainians to come back? Have you ever heard from some president or prime minister of Ukraine? I haven't, but probably it was not my major interest, But that's the biggest problem, because we are what Andrew was mentioning. It's fighting for talents, but we are letting talents go. And according to Ukrainian different statistics, probably in Ukraine there is now something like 38 million people, not even 40 something, And it's a sad thing. Another thing that we always think that Ukraine is the major point of interest in international politics, and it's not true. And also, I'm now reading the book that Michael Bloomberg wrote. It's called Climate of Hope, and he is basically writing about climate change. But what he says, that in some countries, the temperature might change for 2 degrees, and it can impact on the migration flows between countries. It probably concerns Asia more, but we never think about this. While letting people, Ukrainians, leave the country, we are kind of opening also the door for other nationalities to come, which is not probably the problem also because it's a global world, but it depends whether we will be able to respond again with these opportunities and economic value to Ukrainians.
Very good points.
So for me, this is important.
And definitely, how can we utilize that Ukrainian talent which goes abroad, gets educated there? By the way, maybe not the best example, but as India and Pakistan developed their nuclear programs, and their nuclear programs were developed by their students at the U.S. universities. All those physicists who went there. Maybe that's not the best example, but this is actually what China is now doing. The number of students they send to the U.S. is enormous. There is even a famous case now against the Harvard University for discrimination. Because basically they cannot take so many Chinese students in, and some believe that it's actually discrimination. Nevertheless, it's all about how we can harness that talent. Now, Dmitro, the floor is yours, generally speaking on this. Migration, how can we use it for the economic, for the implementation of the economic idea in Ukraine?
You know, the world is changing too fast, and for economy, it's very good when you have like strong labor mobility. So economists think that you know, migration is one of the instruments for created incentives. For instance, if the government of Ukraine leaves, we are closed from the other world, and Ukrainians just sit here for relatively small salaries. They do not have opportunities to change their place. It's a kind of warm bath for people who define policy here. If people are leaving, it's a very strong signal. I understand that for business it creates problems, but it's a signal that something is wrong here. I don't see it's a big problem because, you know, if a person moved to Poland, worked for a few years, even if his family, and opportunities emerge here in Ukraine much better, there is no problem to move back. No. Many friends of mine, they spent many years in US, in UK, they have excellent education. And after the revolution, they tried to move back here. They believe that there will be some new opportunities.
But they're still here.
Not all of them, but but anyway. So the point is that if we want to compete for people, there should be created new opportunities. And the question should be asked to people who are defining rules of the game. It's if people are leaving, escaping the country, probably the question should be asked not just to, you know, some people who are observing the process. The question should be asked for the people who are creating the environment.
Right.
And again, another point related to economic stuff, economic like leverages. If people are leaving and those people who stay here become scarce and more expensive, it's an incentive to invest in equipment. Because if, for instance, you were able to hire 10 people for $200 and they were able to complete some stuff of work, probably if you are able to find one person, but for 1,000, you will think about like capitalization. So I think this tendency is very healthy.
Good.
Maybe it's complicated. It's not like a warm bath for everyone who is involved, but I think this tendency is healthy.
Thanks, Metro. What's your perspective, Svetlana?
You know, in 2012, I've been on study visit in Poland, in the Polish Ministry of Higher Education and Science. They have divided Ministry for Primary Education and Higher Education and Science. And the head of some department made a presentation for us, and it was written in his presentation that they have a specific target to attract at least 10% of students next year from Ukraine. And I've been very much disappointed with this because I fail to see the reason why our students have to come to Poland, because they will most probably never come back. And at the same time, nowadays we have quite good universities and quite a good, well, at least we can compare universities in Poland and some universities in Ukraine. As an entrepreneur, I may share my personal experience from my perspective. As in our co-working spaces, we are mostly working with the very young people, 19, 20, 22. And some of them are really looking for opportunities to go study somewhere abroad. And why I mentioned Poland is because some of the guys were really considering an opportunity to go to Poland to study this year. And my partner and I, we were just opening for them an idea to start studying in Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv, which is not bad at all, which is maybe even greater university than the Polish ones. And the guys were like really considering this opportunity, and a number of them entered the university in master's programs over there. I myself, I'm a student. I'm a student of Lviv Business School. So this is one important thing. If you have a grant to go study somewhere abroad, I mean United States, Britain or something, Okay, this is a very good experience, and I agree here with Irina that this kind of migration is cool when you come back and when you bring this experience and so on. But when you go to Poland through a specific program that attracts our brains, this is not a good idea. And if you can talk to your workers and explain them all the things that will follow, it's very important, and it's probably your role also as a leader, because every person that left the country is a small tragedy. My sister since 1999 lives in Czech Republic. She migrated because of love, not because of work, but still this is a tragedy because we are divided, and I know a lot of examples like that. So your role as a leader here, as an entrepreneur, maybe to talk to your people and try to develop individual program for everyone. Support the ideas, support their goals, maybe even share some costs for education, and support in this way their incentive to stay in Ukraine and contribute to Ukraine and Ukrainian development. Thank you.
Yeah, very good, interesting insights. I would like to welcome more questions actually from the floor. I understand that we've been now going on for 1 hour and a half, even longer, and it might be difficult, but oh, that's good. Emmanuel, here is a question. There was the next question over there. Maybe we can take 2 questions at a time and then welcome the responses from all, okay?
Emmanuel Love, French, living in Ukraine for 6 years already. Member of the French Chamber of Commerce. I'm a business consultant, mentor and coach for specialized in SMEs. So huge need in Ukraine. That's not the point. You were telling about what the government or the authorities can do for the business. It's a good framework. Not subvention, and I'm French. And you imagine I say that. The business is quite pretty good in searching for subsidies in France, but it doesn't work, as you were mentioning. The framework, the ideal framework for us as a business investor, it's a fair competition. How to build a fair competition? I will answer the question, in fact. It's justice. Yeah. Enforcing law, applying it, condemning bad people, and then you will have the framework to work honestly. When? When?
Oh, but this is a very good question. Let's take another question so that we have a little bit some additional questions to answer. If we cannot answer the question of when we're going to have rule of law in Ukraine.
Hello. I actually have 3 questions, so I can ask 1 now and 2 later, if you don't mind.
No, just go ahead. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
you will forget the rest of them.
It's okay.
Before I finish. Okay. So, I mean, thinking of the national idea, on the one hand, it should be
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Sergei Ivanikov. I'm a managing director of Makulan and Companions. This is the Austrian development company. Mm-hmm. We were actually the first foreign investor in the real estate of Ukraine when my partner, Dr. Makulan, built the first office center near the Bessarabian market 26 years ago. Imagine.
Impressive. Well done, yeah.
Crazy time it was. The crazy investor he was. My question is thinking of the national economic idea. I mean, on the one hand, it should be very local to be accepted by the what we call the пересічний українець, the local, the simple people. At the same time, it must be global, because I mean, for obvious reasons too, because we want to have our own place in the sort of in the global market, etc. Maybe you can give us a couple of examples how the same thing can be local and global, and how maybe how global becomes local or local becomes global. That's question number 1.
That's a good one. Let's take one by one, I guess. Well, the first question was about the rule of law. When Ukraine will finally have rule of law, and then the next question, how something which can be immediately local and global at the same time. I think it's a little bit more difficult. We need to come up with some good examples. But Ira, maybe you have them from this standpoint of municipalities and city. If any, I'm just not pushing anyone, but just we need to start answering.
Responding to the question when, I think when it will be like really bad, you know, because I had the chance to meet Kaha Bandukidze half a year before he died, and we had a number of good discussions. And he said, if you're still in Ukraine, if you're still not opposing the government and the system, it's because it's still not that bad. You know, so actually, I think it's either when all these opinion leaders and businessmen, they will speak loudly also, you know, because some attacks of justice system are just hidden. You know, people don't want to make it public because they are afraid to lose their business, to like reputational risk and etc. So maybe and at that moment when we will all not be afraid and we will speak loudly about the problems. Talking about local and global, I think we are already in a global world, you know, and when you talk about, again, issues of migrations, like if you look at China, Ukraine, I don't know, Brazil, and Tanzania, people have more or less the same needs. First of all, they want to stay in the country and in the city, which is safe. That's the first value of city and a country. Then they want to have economic opportunities to grow. They want to have good education and, again, opportunities and facilities and infrastructure for the kids, families, and they want to have some distractions, you know, like theater, cinema, etc. So it's already like global values and needs are more or less the same. Then the question would be what we would propose, what we would be, I would say, proud of. You know, because now it's the matter of pride also. And remember, when Maidan happened, we were like there. Why? Because we felt that we are proud for the country. We wanted to protect, etc. So here we would need to find something what to offer. And as in Ukraine, which has a very difficult political background, I would say that we would need to reinvent it, because even historical figures, my heroes being from Lviv and heroes of someone else who is coming from, I don't know, Donetsk are a bit different. So we would need to create something new which would have a value. But global and local, I think it's already made.
I think the answer is very simple. We need a Ukrainian Jeff Bezos. Will unite. Nobody really cares. I mean, it's all, and I think this is a good thing about economic idea, because it's unifying factor. Because people in all parts of Ukraine want to have better standards of living, and this is clear. This is the most unifying factor of all, right? So we should all be focused on growth, economic development, etc. Andrew, Dmitro, Svetlana, there were some questions. Please feel free to.
Could I jump in on Emmanuel's question? When you know, this is supply and demand question, or chicken and egg question. Does culture lead and then the politics catch up and then the economy, or is it the economic growth and the middle class and then demand things? And you can never answer this conclusively. You can make argument every which way. With supply and demand analogy, there is demand for rule of law, and the more there is this demand, eventually supply of it will happen. But if demand subsides, if we stop asking for it, if the business community says, "Oh, look, we really want it, but we know it's not going to happen, so let's just forget it." And you know, maybe if I could go back, and then you just mentioned Jeff Bezos, for this flywheel to start rolling, it's very difficult to get it going, right? And the question of investment, right? Investment comes with, especially foreign investment, comes with the expectation. So it's immediately a reflection of how the system is evolving. If tomorrow we have, I don't know, 10 new investors, each one put in $1 billion, it's a recognition that the system's improved. But each one of those investments will come in with new practices, new expectations, and it will put more pressure on the system to improve even more. But if we don't have any investment, we don't have any kind of, where the leadership comes from? Is it Europe needs to come up with a special kind of funding vehicle that will nudge the system a little more? Or does the leadership need to come grassroots within Ukraine? And we looked at the mayor examples that can create a specific situation, bring in investment. Like everything is contingent on everything else. So it's It's a difficult question to answer. But if I could also pick this local versus global, if we're talking about national idea, it needs to appeal viscerally. It needs to be something that people connect to. Maybe I'll borrow language that CFC invented for representing Ukraine in Davos. It was about creativity, innovation, and opportunity. So the national economic idea shouldn't be, a sector specific or kind of we're good at this thing. No, it's just what do we believe in, or what makes us unique, and it needs to be simple. And then, in a way, if we're talking about creativity, creative economy, if we're talking about local innovation, at every which level, if those things are appealing to folks, then that's what the national idea is. It cannot. I don't think we can come up with a specific kind of. The national idea is to build, I don't know, IT startups or to be good at agriculture. It has to be more on emotions than specifics.
I would build on that and add about local versus global. I feel like we cannot name this in exact words, this new national economic idea, but we already have examples of this idea working. I mean, we are now sitting in Unit City. Is this a local or global project? I don't know, but I would rather say that this is a global project. We've been talking about Pромприлад renovation, Ivano-Frankivsk. Is this global or local? I don't know. For me, it's rather global because foreign investors are coming there, because foreign companies are coming there, and it's becoming a benchmark for the globe. Or a widely known project, Urban Space. You probably know, launched in Frankivsk, then launched in Kyiv. Now they have requests to share this idea in San Francisco, in other countries in Europe. It was starting like a very local thing to create a new culture in Ivano-Frankivsk, but that became a really global idea and a really global example. These are the examples of soft power we need to promote Ukraine, and these are the examples of this new economic idea. I'm sure in some time we will come up with the right wording for that, but it's good. It's a good news that we already have examples of that working. And coming back to the rule of law issue, as a lawyer, I would reflect on that also. For me, it's painful to listen about when we're talking about rule of law. We are usually talking about judiciary branch of power, and we are criticizing it. But rule of law is not only about enforcement of the law; it's also about the quality of law and legal regulation itself. What we have in Ukraine now, it's slightly changing. It's getting better, and there is a lot of organizations which contribute, think tanks, better regulation delivery office launched, and so on. But we still have a lot of regulations inherited from Soviet Union, and these regulations are usually concentrated on procedures. They are not focused on the result. Like when inspections, just a few years ago, it's not working like this anymore, but just a few years ago, when inspection comes to your restaurant to check your kitchen, they will not check whether it's clean and safe. They will check whether you observe the procedure. Procedures may be stupid, may be old, they may not be working at all, but if you don't comply with the procedure, you will be punished, you will get a fine. And this is not the right thing. We have to rebuild the legislation in a smart way. If you're talking about the role of the government in the overall story of entrepreneurship, the government, in my personal opinion, has to have minor roles, set rules, but these rules have to be smart. When I say smart, I mean that government, before introducing any new rule, before creating Ministry of IT, has to ask one simple question. What do we want to achieve by doing this? What is the goal? What is the aim? If I want to have a safe kitchen in the restaurant, I set standard. As a government, I set standard. I provide recommendations how to achieve this standard. But I do not prescribe the procedure. I do not create the incentives for corruption in that way, and so on and so forth. So we have a huge work to be done, not only in judiciary branch, but also in the legislation reform. And here, the role of business is enormous also, because voice of business has to be heard. There is a lot of initiatives that make consultations with business, and you have a lot of professional associations where you have to raise these issues and lobby the government to try to change these things. Then the life will be better for everyone, for sure.
That's for sure. Dmitro?
Actually, about rule of law and potential improvement, one story is to create an excellent legislation, and another side of the story is like to create practice. As you know, that how it's in Russian, жесткость законов смягчается необязательностью их исполнения. So, and the story is that if you are talking about judges, it could not happen that some few judges will be like the most strict or the most honest. When they go out of the court, they have family, they have friends, they have relatives, they are part of this society. And usually if society wants, as you know, this joke that Ukrainian is against, first of all, wants to fight corruption, and the second point wants to have a friend who will solve everything. So probably the judge, or the many judges in some way will reflect this pattern of behavior which is like supported or like tolerated in society. I agree that it's moving in the right direction, but it will not happen like a snap on one day. Probably it will take years or even generations, and maybe when I will be 100 years old, that people will select Ukrainian jurisdiction to resolve some cases. But, I communicate to people, again, it's like daily practice. If people used to resolve some stuff, again, like paying bribes, because bribes are, it's not a problem for people. For people, corruption is a problem solver. It was created like a problem solver. In some cases, the most interpretorial people, they try to create more impediments to after that to help you to overcome those impediments. But anyway, it's corruption is tolerated, like flexible rule of law is tolerated, and it will not pass away in one day, in 1 month, or even in a few years. It will be very, very gradual. That's my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Dmitro. Look, we are running out of time. So what I suggest, you pick one question, and then I think we're done. Let's discuss later. It's already 3 o'clock. And then I will ask basically each speaker to summarize. You may answer the last question if you feel like it, and then we'll wrap up, okay?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for actually finding and mentioning these ideas, which are great ideas, both local and global, and the very fact that we were able to mention them means that probably we are doing something right in this country. Maybe not as fast as we want, but what I'm really missing is the leaders must lead. That's what I'm really missing. Yeah. And over the last the years of Ukrainian independence, we had leaders who they didn't lead us really. Even plus. The objectives, the goals, they were so vague, and they still very vague. When you think of this European idea, European values, it's so bloody vague. It's what is it? Is this what kind of Europe we want? Do we want Hungary, or do we want France, or what is it? And what I'm really missing is the concrete and very clear, simple goals. Like Irina mentioned with all these local municipalities, make the water drinkable. I think that's a fantastic goal. It's a very global goal too. And why Mr. Klitschko didn't make it the sort of the city goal of Kiev, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let's breathe the fresh air, for example. Why not? So, what do we do with the leadership? maybe, I mean, I'm not talking maybe about the formal leadership. Maybe the guys who are our formal leaders. This is not a personal critics. It's maybe they are just not leaders. Maybe we should look for leaders somewhere else and become and make them leaders. Maybe these people who are sitting on the podium now, well, this is the leaders, because to me, what they say makes much more sense. It's concrete, it's achievable. We more or less understand what kind of resources do we need, etc., etc.
Thank you. I mean, this is a very good leadership question to wrap it up. And please, I would like to. We should stick to the order. So Andrew, leadership, a new economic idea, and summary. And what is that one Ukraine's national economic idea we should pursue? If you could, in one sentence, if possible.
For every country, Brandon, it's good to come up with one word, not even one sentence. So for me, what defines Ukraine's strengths or Ukrainian national idea or Ukraine's economic idea is just one word. It's grassroots. It's ability to organize at grassroots, ability to lead at grassroots level, ability to invent. And I love this question. When I was pondering, what could I say at this panel, I came back in every which direction. I come back to this question of leadership. Who is taking our country anywhere? Is it our elected officials? Is it the presidents, the parliament? Is it us as individuals? The answer is, at every single level, somebody is taking this country forward in some way. So it all comes down to the question of leadership, our own kind of what do we do, what do we contribute as me, how am I engaged in the political process or any other process? Am I willing to invent something? Am I willing to take risk to achieve business success or any other type of success? So I would end with this. It's leadership at grassroots is what
leadership
matters.
Leadership at grassroots, very good. Irena?
Honestly speaking, these last two topics made me really sad about corruption and leadership. And what you said, that what we are talking about sounds nice, but I don't want to be a leader who talks. I want to be a small leader who does. That's very important for me personally. I think leaders are people whom we trust, and if you are ready to follow your mayor, your prime minister, your president, saying, yes, that's the leader whom I want to kind of help, whose idea I'm ready to support and help sacrificing your job in business, or even without any sacrifices, but helping. That's a definition for me. And also the personal leadership, because I still believe, but that's again, it's a very philosophical question, because we can talk about Maslow pyramids. We can talk about the maturity of our nation. So it's kind of global. But again, if there is a new law on waste management, are you all going to put 3-4 waste boxes? And will you do this? Will I do this? Yes, I will, only at the moment where I will know that it will be processed and selected and not brought to the same thing, because I don't see then the reason why to do it. So for me, it's all about trust. For me, it's all about being a personal leader, and it's more about doing and then talking. But talking about national idea, I think it should be built on patriotism. It's very simple, yes, and it might sound banal, but when we love the country, when we are patriots of the country, we want to create for the country, we want to live here, and we are ready to do not only for our, again, this negative side of individual interest, but also for lots of us, And it shouldn't be, again, probably it's a trend after the Maidan. It shouldn't be measured by Facebook posts and likes. That's important, because our ministers and leadership is reporting on Facebook. It's probably a good way of communication, but it shouldn't be measured by this.
Good. Dmitro?
If talking about national idea, I think that the first place in this idea should be opportunities. I'm a patriot, but I strongly disagree that this point should be the first in national idea, in national economic idea. I have experience over the last 2 years of arranging an association of owners in my apartment block. And I'm...
Plus more.
Yeah, and there's this experience from the field. I'm very skeptical about leadership in Ukraine. Ukrainians are very skeptical on everything. They suspect everyone in very bad stuff. But if
what you're describing is grassroots leadership by you, so it's an excellent example.
But if they see some real results, they very suspectful, but at least they become more involved. Mm-hmm. And so I don't believe in national leader who will lead us like Lee Kuan Yew to some new ideas. But I believe in a national leader who will be able, for instance, to hypothetically to put aside his private interests and invest in, for instance, better living for the country. Unfortunately, we didn't meet such a person. In my opinion, I really very sad when I see some opinion polls. I understand that Ukrainians simply do not see any leadership on the horizon. Even if someone is better than the other, people are simply distrusted of any idea. And again, I will repeat that just national idea of better opportunity, better prosperity, and on this ground we will be able to build something.
Good. Thank you, Dmitro. Svetlana?
I will be closing, so I will be very quick. This is actually a very good question about leadership. My personal position about this is that you can be a leader at your own place, whatever you are, at home, at work. You can launch projects, you can launch I don't know, separate collection of waste at your house and then organize transferring this waste to a sorting station or something like that. And it's also leadership. It's a small steps. You don't always need a formal leadership, and in very often cases, formal leadership will not be helpful. I mean, projects like I mentioned before, like Unit City or something else. Does the formal leadership matters here? No. Some guy someday decided that he wants to do that. He raised the flag, gathered the team, and started doing right things. No one forced us to do things we do, but still we are doing that. And this is a leadership. Small leadership, as Irina said, everyone at his own place can make this world better, and this is a real word. I'm, by the way, very positive about the experience of creating this association at our house. I have absolutely, totally different experience, and my husband and I, we are running this process at home, and the people are very positive about the idea of creating an association, of doing all the stuff together. So that differs from maybe even from city to city, from street to street. It's always different. And about the national idea, I stick to the position that entrepreneurship and our individualism and entrepreneurship built on that is our national idea. We have to give some freedom to our entrepreneurial spirit. We have to let it flow, and I think that the less formal leadership we have, the better results will be. Thank you.
Excellent. That was a great panel. So many ideas have been discussed. So big round of applause.
I just wanted still to make a compliment to Unit City and again local and global. As you probably know, what they did, they brought École 42, École 42 from France. And as much as I am a fan of Amsterdam, then our Amsterdam colleagues, they came to Kyiv, they learned the experience how Unit did this, and then they introduced this in Amsterdam. So it also showed that we do a great job, and locally and globally. Thank you.
Great. And I would like also to thank EBS and MChamp for supporting this event. I think this is a great discussion. So there was a call for action, grassroots leadership, opportunities, entrepreneurship. Now we've got to act and deliver, right? We've got to carry it out, implement it, and let's get convened back in 1 year from now and look what we have delivered. Personally, as a company, as a country. So thank you very much. You're welcome. We'll have a reception and networking now.